On the morning of the company's annual summit, I stood in front of the mirror and checked the collar of my suit one last time. Dark gray Armani, bought 3 years ago. At that time, Eric accompanied me to choose. He said that the color complimented me and made me look professional and not old-fashioned. I believed it, just like what I believe he said a lot in the past 15 years. We will be responsible for the project, we will lead the team, and we will write the annual report. When he said we, the emphasis always fell on I, lightly floating over the word we, as if he was completing some necessary grammatical fill-in-the-blank, but I had never listened carefully to the pronunciation of that ending. The phone screen lit up, and a message popped up from his avatar. Don't be late. Your position for the photo today is very important. The people from the board of directors are here. I didn't reply. Over the past 15 years, I have never responded to any of his messages for more than 3 minutes. When revising the draft late at night, he said, please smooth out the logic of this paragraph. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I replied, okay. When I was on a business trip, he said, bring me a cup of coffee. I walked through 3 terminals to find the store he specified during the 40 minutes of my transfer. He said, we are a team, and I really thought that was us. Today is the exception. I grabbed the name badge on the table and pinned it to the front of my suit. The name column is printed with Claire M, and the position column is empty because Eric said, we will decide your position later. When he sent me the new organizational chart last week, my name had been moved from project director to senior consultant, tucked into an appendix on the penultimate page of the document. He said it was a temporary adjustment to cope with the audit. I believed it. I still believed it then. The venue was the glass-walled Marriott Hotel in the center of the city. The banquet hall on the 3rd floor was covered with dark blue carpets. The lights were adjusted to warm yellow, and some kind of jazz music from the era was playing on the speakers. The interns in the human resources department stood at the door handing out brooches. This year is the 40th anniversary of the company. Each of them has a small gold-plated badge pinned to the left collar. When I reached out to take it, my fingertips touched the back of the girl's hand. She quickly retracted and smiled at me. The smile was so wide that the corners of her mouth almost split to the base of her ears. I've seen that kind of smile too many times. It only appears when someone knows that they shouldn't be standing here, but they have to stand here. What's her last name? Maya? Mila? He seems to be Lu Yao's assistant. Lu Yao is the new one. He was transferred from the Los Angeles branch 3 months ago. Even his business card has one more line of cursive characters printed on it than the others. The first time I saw her was at the quarterly meeting. She wore a light blue silk shirt. Her hair was curled meticulously, her eyelashes were brushed 3 layers, and the ends were covered with sequins the size of rice grains, which could be seen from 3 rows of seats in the conference room. Eric said she had a lot of potential. I was looking down at the project revision he had just forwarded to me. There were 17 changes in the document, and the red annotations in each place came from my original work in the past 6 months. He carried over my analytical framework intact, only changing the signature on the title page. I asked him how to write the signature column of this amendment. He raised his head and looked at me with that "you care too much" look. Claire, we are together. Does it matter who signs the name? As he spoke, his hands were resting on the back of Lu Yao's chair. His knuckles were white, and his neatly manicured nails glowed a healthy pink. I've seen those hands too many times. The first time he held my hand 15 years ago was in the parking lot downstairs of the company. He said, I'll see you off after get off work. I said, no. And he said, let me see you off once. Then his hand was covered like that, dry, warm, with the citrus smell of freshly washed hand cream. The hand was now resting on the back of Lu Yao's chair. His wedding ring is still on his ring finger. Mine is also there. The group photo was arranged at 10 o'clock sharp before the official agenda of the annual summit began. More than 40 people entered the main hall from 3 banquet halls. Champagne towers were placed on both sides of the entrance. Waiters walked through them carrying silver trays. Water droplets condensed on the rims of the glasses, breaking into white lights under the light. I stood outside the crowd, holding a copy of the meeting agenda in my hand. A hard copy. Eric handed it to me yesterday. He said, hold it for me. I will use it for taking pictures later. His name and title, Design Director, were printed on the cover of the agenda in bold and gold-gilded font, with a line filling the header. My name is on the back cover, in song font size 4, Document Coordinator, behind the 6 assistants. I can't describe what it felt like at that moment. Maybe there was something in my stomach that twisted slightly, like a thread being slowly tightened, and the end of the thread was held in his hand. I stood on the other end, not even daring to move. Someone tapped me on the shoulder from behind. Claire, stand over here. It's Eric. He was wearing the dark blue suit that I set him for dry cleaning last month and the tie I gave him for his birthday last year, navy blue with thin silver thread. At that time, he said it was too formal, and I said it looks good on you, so he wore it. Weared it for a whole year. Weared it today too. His fingers pressed gently on my shoulder blades, not with much force, but in a clear direction, and pushed me half a step to the side. Make way, Lena stands in the middle. Lena, Lu Yao's English name. She stood beside him, her light blue shirt changed into a dress of the same color. The hem of the skirt was just 2 inches above her knees. A thin white belt was tied around her waist, and she was holding a bouquet of white roses she got from somewhere in her hand. The bouquet was so big that it almost covered half of her face. She seemed to be shocked by that half step, and waved her hands quickly. No, I'll just stand by and don't embarrass Claire. She didn't move her feet as she spoke. Eric glanced down at her and curved his mouth. You are the new representative today. You look good standing in the middle. There was a burst of low laughter all around. Someone whistled. Someone took a picture of them with a mobile phone. Hey, Eric takes care of his new colleagues so much. Claire gave way. Got it. Isn't it right? A partnership of 15 years is no better than a 3-month transfer. I stood where I was. The carpet half a step away felt a little softer than before, maybe because that area happened to be covered with thick padding, or maybe it was because my knees were shaking. My heart was beating so fast that I felt a slight discomfort inside my ribs, as if something was about to rush out of my chest, but my throat was blocked. The sunlight slanted in through the side window and fell on the carpet, lengthening and crumpling everyone's shadows. Outside the window is the highway in the city center, and the traffic moves silently outside the glass, like a silent documentary. I glanced down at the agenda in my hand. Eric's name on the cover was gilded and reflected light, which made my eyes ache. The photographer held up the camera and shouted, "Everyone is standing still. Hurry up, the light is gone. We will take a group photo after taking this photo." I took a step back. Eric reached out to take the agenda in my hand. "Give me this and stand aside." I didn't let go. He was startled. Lu Yao immediately whispered, "Why don't you let Claire stand next to you? Is she unhappy?" This sentence was like a key inserted into the locked attention of everyone present. There was a click, and all eyes turned around and stared at my face. Eric frowned and lowered his voice so that only I could hear, "Claire, don't keep everyone waiting." I looked up at him. The light was so bright that his figure standing in front of me looked like an overexposed film, with the edges of his outline glowing white. I have watched that face for 15 years, starting from when he was a fledgling design assistant and watching him rise to supervisor, director, and vice president. I have contributed to every promotion he received. I revised 3 versions of the project plan for him, I made 2 bidding presentations for him, and I stayed up late to write half of the annual report. Every time he stood on stage to receive applause, he would habitually look to the right side of the first row of the auditorium, where I was. I thought it was because he was looking for me. Now, I understand that he was just confirming that the person who supported him was still there. Claire. He called my name again, the ending sound low and tight, like a door being closed. I finally let go. The agenda was taken away by him, and the gilded words on the cover scratched the pads of my fingers, leaving a shallow white mark. The weight on my palm suddenly became empty. I looked down at my palm. There was still a piece of gilding embedded in the fingerprint. It shone in the light and was softened by my body temperature. I retreated to the edge of the line. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Everyone's positions have been fixed, with the creative team in the center. Eric and Lu Yao stand side by side in the most conspicuous position in the first row. He holds the agenda in his left hand, and his right hand rests on her waist 2 inches above her waist. His posture is as precise as if he has rehearsed it. I stopped at the far left end, and next to me was Xiao Chun from the finance department. She smiled nervously at me and said, "Sister Claire, are you standing here?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Then stand in the middle. This position is too biased." I said, "No need." My feet were nailed in place. In fact, it's not that I don't want to move, but that a tendon on the inside of my ankle is twitching slightly, as if it's being pinched by something. I looked down and saw that the carpet was as smooth as ever, with nothing on it. Someone behind her laughed softly. "Claire has such a good temper. She is not angry at all." Eric heard it. He didn't look back. He just said calmly, "Claire wouldn't be so stingy." I pursed my lips. It turns out that with him, my emotions can be defined in advance. Not being angry is called sensible. Being angry is called stingy. For the first time in 15 years, I wanted to ask him, what if I don't want to be sensible anymore? The photographer raised his hands to count down. 3, 2, 1 dash. Everyone raised their lips at the same time. I laughed too. It's just that the beam of sunlight coming in from the side window was too direct, falling just on the left side of my face, while the right side of my face was hidden in the shadow of the pillar next to me. The shutter sound of the camera was like a short sigh, swallowed up by the jazz music in the stereo, leaving nothing behind. I later learned that this photo would be printed on the first page of the annual report. And on that page, I only had half my face. After the show ended, the crowd seemed to have been thrown a handful of sand and immediately dispersed in 3 directions. Some people surrounded Lu Yao, some wanted to take a photo with the CEO, and some already started discussing which restaurant to go to for lunch. The champagne tower was pushed away, and the waiter squeezed in with a new silver tray. The water droplets on the rim of the glass reflected circles of colorful specks in the movable light. I leaned against the window and rubbed the pad of my index finger repeatedly with my thumb. The shard of hot stamping just now is no longer there, but there is still a small dry and astringent feeling on the skin, as if it has been lightly rubbed with sandpaper. Lu Yao was surrounded by several female colleagues. His voice emerged from the crowd, soft and sweet. "Thank you so much, Eric, today. I'm afraid Claire will misunderstand it. Do you think she will mind?" Someone answered, "How can Claire be so narrow-minded? She has always been generous." It's just that she and Eric have been partnered for so many years. It's just about positioning, it doesn't matter. I raised my eyes. Lu Yao was looking towards me across the crowd. The moment her eyes met mine, she smiled. The arc of that smile was precise. The corners of the mouth were raised 15 degrees. The corners of the eyes were motionless, a standard. I'm showing you good expression, but the speed was too fast, as if he was completing a designated action and moved away immediately after completing it. I know this look. When she first arrived at the branch last year, she walked into my office with the same appearance, holding a cup of latte in her hand, and said, "Sister Claire, I just came here and I don't understand a lot. Please give me more advice in the future." At that time I said, okay. Later I discovered that she would go to Eric's office every Friday afternoon to ask questions. The door was ajar, and she could be seen from the outside sitting in the chair opposite his desk with a folder that would never be turned open on her lap while he was telling her about the long-term value of teamwork. I thought I was worrying too much. Later, I discovered that Eric's business trip schedule had several round-trip to Los Angeles records, and the dates overlapped with the meetings he was supposed to go to in Chicago. I asked him about it, and he said the company temporarily deployed him. I believed it. Will I always believe it? Claire. Eric's voice came from behind. He still held the agenda in his hand and put his other hand in his trouser pocket. His shoulder line was flattened when he stood upright, looking very relaxed, as if nothing had happened. Why were you standing so far away just now? I turned sideways and faced him. You asked me to stand. He paused. Didn't I ask you to stand aside? Who's next to you? I asked him. The tone was very calm, so calm that I felt strange to myself. I never talked like this before. In the past, when he forgot to bring a USB flash drive, I would hand him a backup. When he has to go on a business trip, I will pack his suitcase for him. He set me look at this again late at night, and I would turn on the computer and recalculate the 3 sets of data. Even if it's been so long that he doesn't remember, I will still care. Eric frowned. It's just a position. Lena is new here, so give me some face. You won't be unhappy because of this, right? I looked into his eyes. The brown irises glowed with a faint honey color under the overhead light, and there were a few fine lines at the corners of his eyes, which were there when I first met him 15 years ago. At that time, he said that he was tired from staying up late and drawing pictures. I believed him. Now I suddenly want to ask him, who are you drawing with during those nights? What if I say I'm not happy? Eric was stunned for a second. He probably really didn't expect me to answer that way. He moved his lips as if he was about to say something, then swallowed it. When he spoke again, his tone was obviously lowered. Don't be like this. Everyone is watching. Today is the annual summit. The atmosphere is good. Don't get into trouble over this trivial matter. Little things. It turns out that my 15 years of dedication can be compressed into 2 words in his mouth, like an old sweater folded and stuffed into the bottom of a box, with all the more important things buried inside it, never to be dug out again. I nodded. You're right, it's a small matter. Eric's eyebrows immediately relaxed. He raised his right hand as usual and stretched his thumb towards my ear. That was his habitual action of stroking my hair, ever since we first got together. No matter what the occasion, whenever he felt he had coaxed me well, he would use this action to end the conversation. I turned my head to avoid it. His hand hung in the air. The air became silent for a moment. Lu Yuanyuan called him. Eric, the CEO, asked us to take a group photo of the core team. He immediately stopped his hand and said, "Here he comes." After taking 2 steps out, he looked back at me and spoke very quickly, as if he was rushing for time or something more urgent. You can sit next to me for lunch. Didn't we agree that we would have a meal alone? Today is the perfect day. Error 500, server error. 1500, that's an error. There was an error. Please try again later. That's all we know. But today the key can't open any door. Error 500, server error. 1500, that's an error. There was an error. Please try again later. That's all we know. Eric frowned again. Wasn't that thing finalized last week? The design director said that the signature page needs to be checked again. When I said the words design director, his eyes flashed. It was as fast as a spark splashing into the eye and being blinked away immediately. But I saw it. Then come early when you're done and don't keep everyone waiting. I watched him turn around and walk towards Liu Yao. The sunlight was just right in that direction. His back was covered with a layer of gold, and even the hair on the back of his head looked particularly thick and neat. Liu Yao turned sideways beside him and gave him half a step of distance, just the social distance that allowed them to be side by side without touching each other. It was so standard that it looked like it had been calculated. A young colleague laughed and said, Eric and Lena look good together. My steps paused, but just for a moment. I turned around and walked out of the banquet hall. The clinking sound of champagne glasses behind me was blocked by the automatic door. The corridor was covered with gray silent carpet, and my high heels made no sound when I stepped on it. The pad of my right index finger was still astringent, so I squeezed it into my palm and dug my nails into the flesh. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, when I arrived at the printing factory, the factory doorman was eating a lunchbox with fried noodles in a plastic lunchbox. The chopsticks were stuck on the lid of the lunchbox. He bit one with his teeth and freed his hand to register me as a visitor. Coming to deliver the annual report? Come and check, I said. He pointed to the 3rd floor of Building C inside. The typesetting room is working overtime today. You can just go up. The elevator is a freight elevator, and the inner wall of the iron sheet is covered with various notices and QR codes. I leaned in the corner, looking up at the floor numbers and jumping up one by one. 1, 2, 3. With a ding sound, the door opened. The corridor was empty, and the typesetting room door at the end was ajar. There was the sound of keyboard tapping and the hum of the printer running. I opened the door and walked in. There were several sample books stacked on the table. The cover was matte white, and the company logo in silver was just stuck on the golden section. I walked over and picked up the top one. The paper is still warm as the ink is not yet dry, and when you press it with your fingertips, it will leave a fingerprint, like the first footprint on the snow. Turn to the first page, the title page of the company's annual report. On the second page, a message from the CEO. On the third page, the list of the main creative team. My finger stopped. On the version I last checked last Friday, the column for text coordinator said, Claire M., senior consultant of the planning department. It is accompanied by a photo of me at the company's annual meeting last year. Although the location is off, the name is clear and the font size is the same as everyone else's. That photo is still there. The name is there too. But there is an additional line of parentheses next to it. Data collation support. The word support is so small that you can hardly notice it unless you look carefully, but its existence is like a thumbtack in the center of my pupils. Once you see it, you can never erase it. In the coordinators column, Eric's name is listed first, followed by Lena C., with the words joint coordinator in bold and italics. I stared at that line of text for a long time. After a long time, the fluorescent lamp in the typesetting room made a buzzing sound, as if something finally couldn't bear it and cracked slightly. There were footsteps near the door. I closed the sample book and turned around. Lu Yao stood at the door, holding a new bouquet of white roses in his hand, exactly the same as the one taken in the morning. The bouquet was so big that she turned her face sideways to see the direction of the door clearly, and the tip of her nose almost touched the petals. Claire? She was stunned for a moment. Are you coming to the printing factory too? I looked at her. Who changed the signature page? She tilted her head, her expression as innocent as a primary school student who was asked, what is 1 + 1? What signature page? I turned the sample book to the 3rd page, spread it out, and pushed it in front of her. She glanced down, moved the corner of her mouth slightly, very small, almost as fast as an illusion, and then showed the standard, I'm embarrassed expression. This, I'm not sure. Maybe it was Eric's last adjustment. He said he wanted to reflect the full picture of teamwork. The whole picture of teamwork. I smiled. So, he changed me from coordinator to data collection support. Lu Yao raised his head and blinked, his eyes shadow shimmering with light gold under the fluorescent lamp. He said you have always been very low-key and don't like to fight for your signature. Claire, you don't mind, right? Her tone of voice was very soft, like cotton candy, so sweet that it made people think that it would be unkind to contradict her. I looked at her face and suddenly felt very tired. It's not physical fatigue, it's something deeper, like a stone that has sunk to the bottom of the water for too long and is wrapped in moss and aquatic plants. You think it has become part of the riverbed until someone kicks it away and you realize that it can be moved. If you don't mind, I said, why is her name in bold italics? The smile on Lu Yao's face froze for a moment. She lowered her head and glanced at her name. The 4 words joint coordinator were in italics, slightly tilted 3 degrees higher than the rest of the text, and the visual focus of the layout fell exactly on the first letter of her name. This is the typographer. The typewriter will not take the initiative to change the order of signatures. I interrupted her. The order and font were manually adjusted by the designer in InDesign. You went to Eric's office last Friday afternoon and brought a folder with a printer matching list. Who did you give that list to? Lu Yao pursed his lips. Something flickered in those carefully drawn eyes, not aggrieved, but more like something had been touched, exposing the hard shell inside. Claire, do you really have to worry about the name dash? 14 pages. I said. She froze. The text of the annual report has a total of 92 pages. The case study section is 14 pages. All the original materials were sifted by me from the project reports of the 6 quarters of last year. I made the key data comparison table. The color scheme of the chart was decided by me, and I also wrote the first draft of the brand narrative framework. I looked into her eyes. Tell me, what did you jointly coordinate? The typesetting room was quiet for 2 seconds. The printer was still buzzing, and the paper was spitting out page after page, stacked at the paper exit, hot with the smell of toner. Lu Yao's eyes suddenly turned red. She was really red, and there was a thin layer of pink water at the end of her eyes. Even her breathing became a little faster, like a string being tightened at its limit. Then the door was pushed open. Eric walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee in his hands. The cup sleeves were the signature dark green of the chain store next to the printing factory. When he saw me and the red corners of Lu Yao's eyes, he paused. What's going on? I pushed the sample book in front of him. Did you change the signature page? Eric's eyes stopped on the page for half a second. Then he put down the coffee and said in a calm tone of, I am dealing with the problem. Claire, the report is the result of the whole company, and the signatures do not need to be so detailed. There it is again. I listened to him speak for 15 years, repeating the same sentence at the end of a different project each year, and I nodded every time. So, the part I'm responsible for can be removed? I asked. Eric frowned. No one took it away from you. Doesn't your name still exist? Data collation support. 6 words. The last word is support. Lu Yao stood nearby, her tears finally falling down, one by one hitting the petals of the bouquet of white roses, the stems swaying gently between her fingers. Eric, how about delete my name? I really don't want you to. She spoke very quietly, leaving just the right amount of space between each word, as if she was waiting for someone to come in and fill in the blanks. Sure enough, Eric immediately answered. Claire, look how you scared her. I looked at him. 15 years. I discovered for the first time that when he stood in front of me, the picture of me reflected in his pupils would always be the same, a person who would never really leave, never really get angry, and never really push him away. Where are the original files? I asked. Eric paused. Who submitted the final draft? Who modified the InDesign source file? Who sent the printing factory contact email? I said word by word. The company cloud disk has a version history record, and I want to see the modification timeline. The office fell silent. The typewriter stopped, the printer also stopped, and only the fluorescent lamp above my head made a low and continuous sound of electricity, like some kind of instrument recording my heartbeat. Lu Yao lowered his head and tightened his fingers on the wrapping paper of the bouquet. The pink cellophane crinkled between her fingers, making a tiny rustling sound. Eric looked at me, his expression finally changed. It's not guilt, it's not guilt. The thing on his face is more like anger, like a man who finds that the backup plan he has been accustomed to for 15 years suddenly refuses to be used. Claire, the whole company is here at the annual summit today. Do you have to make such an ugly fuss over this matter? I looked at him. The tight thread in his stomach suddenly loosened at this moment. Not because it was cut off, but because the hand holding it was loosened. He let go. He thought the wire would return to my hand on its own, but the wire stayed in the air for a moment, and then fell to the ground, like an abandoned circuit, with no current flowing through it anymore. I'm just asking where the original files are, I said. Eric was silent for a few seconds. Then he avoided my sight and said in a vague voice, in the cloud disk, you can see for yourself. He pulled Lu Yao out. As he passed by me, Lu Yao's sleeve brushed against my arm, carrying a very light floral perfume smell that was so sweet that it was cloying. She whispered. Claire, I'm sorry. I really didn't know you would care so much. The door closed behind them, lightly and without any heaviness. I stood there, looking down at my empty hands. The astringent feeling from the gold-plated shaving still remains in the palm of my hand. I turned my hand over and stretched out my fingers one by one, the joints turning white. Then I walked to the computer used by the typographer in the corner and logged into the company cloud disk. The account was registered by me. The password is my job number plus project code. That year, Eric said, "You can take care of the archiving. You should be careful." I organized all the information into an ABC 3-level directory according to time, version, and revision person. Even the discarded files that had been retracted were given archive tags. He was standing behind me, his hand on the back of my chair, his chin almost touching the top of my head, and said, "Claire, you are such a treasure. What would I do without you?" At that time, I thought he was telling the truth. Now I understand that he was right. Without me, he really can't do anything. But he still turned me step by step from coordinator to support, from partner to assistant, and from the center of the photo to the edge of the camera. The folder pops up. Final version of annual report, case study material library, and signature confirmation final version. I clicked on the last version. Modified time, 9:17 this morning. It was when I was holding the agenda in the banquet hall waiting for him to take pictures. System prompt. This file was uploaded by Eric W. and overwrites the previous version. I click on version history. Blank. There are no earlier records. My finger paused on the mouse. The printer beeped again and spit out a page of waste paper with a line of garbled characters printed on it, like some kind of trace that could not be identified after being tampered with. The sunlight slanted in from the window and fell exactly on the modified timeline on the screen. 1917. At that time, Eric said to me, "Stand aside." By that time, he was already changing my name. I took my hand away from the mouse and reached into my bag for my phone. The moment the screen turned on, 3 messages popped up, all from Eric. Article 1. Where are you? Article 2. Lena said you made her cry. Article 3. On a day like today, can you not be so serious? Be more serious. I looked at those 2 words for so long that my eyes started to feel sore, not because I wanted to cry, but because my pupils were focused on the same point for a long time and the ciliary muscles began to spasm. Then I replied with 3 words, I'm serious. The phone vibrated almost immediately with an incoming voice call. I hang up. Called again. I continued to hang. When it rang for the 3rd time, I pressed mute and put the phone screen down on the table. The window of the typesetting room was open, and the early summer wind came in with a unique scent of ink and paper scraps from the printing factory, blowing the open sample book on the table. The pages turned through 3 pages and stopped at the beginning of the case study section. The footer of that page was also printed with my name in small song font on the last line behind data organizing support. I stretched out my finger and pressed on the name. The paper is warm, the ink is still wet, and my fingerprint is imprinted on it, like a belated signature. There were footsteps outside the door. This time it was not high heels, but sneakers, the rubber soles making a short scraping sound on the cement floor. The door to the typesetting room was pushed open a crack, and a young woman wearing a gray hoodie poked her head in. Sister Claire? I looked up. It's Xiao Chen from the finance department. She was holding a USB flash drive in her hand, her expression a little nervous. Eric asked me to come over and confirm with you whether the attached table of the annual report is the one you sent me last Friday. He said that the basic data may need to be adjusted. Her voice broke when she saw the sample book in front of me. His eyes swept from the signature on the page and back again. Sister, are you okay? I looked into her eyes. There was confusion, concern, and something inexplicable in those eyes, hesitation. That attached form of yours, I said. Who sent it to you? Xiao Chen was stunned for a moment. Eric, he said you organized it and asked me to import the report template directly. When did he send it to you? It was around 8 o'clock this morning. It's past 8 o'clock. At that time, I was still wearing a suit at home and adjusting my collar in front of the mirror, thinking that I would have a lot to do today. It turns out that things have been done long ago. It's just that the name of the person who finished it has been removed from the list of main creators. I took a deep breath. He inhaled too deeply, and when his lungs were stretched to their maximum, there was a sharp stabbing pain in his ribs, as if something was pressing against his chest from the inside. But I also felt something else at the same time. That thread was completely broken. The USB flash drive in Xiao Chen's hand was still clutched, and his knuckles were slightly white. She looked at me, then at the sample book spread out on the table, and her lips moved, as if she was forming a sentence that she wasn't sure she should say. Sister, she said, actually, when I opened the attached form this morning, I found that the data in it was a little different from the version you sent me last Friday. I raised my eyes. What's different? The total amount has not changed, but the order and labels of the detailed classification items have been renumbered. She took 2 steps closer and put the U-disc on the table. I remember that you originally marked the 4 major categories of Project 80. When I opened it this morning, I found that it had become Department 80, and the classification method was completely changed. Some project expenditures were placed under other departments, and the corresponding person in charge's signature column was also... She stopped. What? Also changed the name. I looked at her. The roots of her ears began to turn red, and her eyes wandered to the cover of the sample book on the table, focusing on the Silver Hot logo, as if looking for a place to put it that would not embarrass her. Whose? I asked. The people from the design department. She said almost vaguely. Eric signed the supplementary confirmation form for those projects. My fingers paused on the edge of the table for a second. Supplementary confirmation form. That is the last sign off in the financial process, usually done by the project leader. That spot has been my signature for the past 15 years. From the pencil draft to the official scan copy, the person in charge column of every confirmation form is my initials, CM, written in one stroke, as smooth as a river. If the names of those signature fields have been changed, it means that the project leader records in the financial filing system have been migrated as a whole. I said, "Did you bring the confirmation slip?" Xiaochen took out his cell phone from his pocket, swiped it a few times, and handed it over. On the screen were several photos of paper documents that had been reproduced. The pixels were not high, but the location of the signature was clearly visible. Eric W., written smoothly with a dark blue ballpoint pen, and the signature date was 3 days ago. This is... She hesitated. I found it in the shared folder this morning. I wanted to ask you directly, but Eric told me not to ask you for confirmation first, saying that time is tight. Let's push the progress first. 3 days ago. What was I doing 3 days ago? I was working on the brand narrative framework for the annual report and sent a copy to Eric at 2 a.m. He said, "Got it. Thank you for your hard work. Go to bed early." I slept. He signed a supplementary confirmation form, transferred all the project leader records for 15 years to his own name, and then told me that time is tight, so push forward first. I suddenly remembered the performance review at the end of last year. The email from the Human Resources Department showed that my project leadership score had dropped from the A level the year before to B+. I asked Eric what was going on, and he said, "It may be a data entry error. I'll ask HR." Later he told me it has been solved. I believed it. Xiaochen, I said, "Are the electronic archives of these confirmation orders still in the company's cloud disk?" She shook her head. I looked for it this morning, and the files under the original path have been moved. Only these few rephotographed pictures are left, because I took pictures with my mobile phone last Friday and saved them in the local photo album. She paused and then added, "Sister, I didn't translate it on purpose. I just found that the classification was wrong when I was preparing the attachment, so I took another look." "You see very well," I said. She breathed a sigh of relief, and the redness at the base of her ears slowly subsided. But her eyes were still on my face, as if waiting for me to say something more serious. I picked up the sample book on the table again and turned to the footer of the case study section. The line data organization support is printed in the lower left corner. The font size is so small that it is almost eaten by the gutter. I counted them. A total of 17 key data classifications have been changed in the case study section, and the source of each point points to my original project documents from the past 6 months. But the signatures on those documents have been replaced entirely. Where it originally read Claire M., it now reads Eric W. and team. Team. This word is so useful. It can hold anyone's name, or it can hold no one's name. I closed the sample book and looked at Xiaochen. "Do me a favor." She immediately stood up straighter and said, "Send me the original copies of these confirmation sheets. Do not use the company email, use personal email or messaging software." She nodded, didn't ask any questions, and lowered her head to operate her phone. In less than half a minute, a new email popped up in my personal mailbox with 3 pictures attached. The file names were in the original format she took, and the shooting time in the metadata was 4:12 p.m. 3 days ago. 4:12. That day, Eric said he was holding a departmental budget meeting and asked me not to disturb him. I really didn't bother. I changed 3 versions of the client presentation for the next day for him at my workstation, and I didn't leave until 9 o'clock in the evening. When he removed my name from the project record, I was writing the PPT for him. I put the phone away and looked at her. "Go back to work. Don't mention anything you saw today to anyone in advance." Xiaochen opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he just nodded, turned around and walked out of the typesetting room quickly. Her sneakers stepped on the cement floor, and the sound of her footsteps became lighter and lighter, and was finally swallowed up by the ding of the elevator from the end of the corridor. I stood there with the sample book in front of me, a computer with a cloud disk page open, a USB flash drive, and 3 newly received pictures on my phone. The wind outside the window blew from the waste paper yard behind the printing factory, carrying the smell of old ink and damp cardboard. I looked down at my fingers. The gold stamping fragment has long since disappeared, but there is still a rough touch in the fingerprint, like sand embedded in the texture of the skin, which cannot be washed away no matter how hard it is washed. I sit down in front of the computer. I reopened the cloud drive, and this time I didn't just check the annual report folder. I scrolled up 2 levels of directories and found the large folder, Project Management Historical Archives. This folder was created 5 years ago. It is an archiving system built by me. The naming rules for each subdirectory are set by me. 5 years ago, Eric said, "You do this, you are careful." So I did. Now I put the mouse on the row of directories, starting from the earliest year, and click on them one by one. In the first year, project records are complete. My name appears in the responsible person column of most documents. The next year, some documents appeared to have double signatures, Claire M. / Eric W. In the third year, Eric's name started to be ranked ahead of mine. In the fourth year, a new file naming rule appeared. The file name that originally started with a project code name was changed to a renamed version in the department year person in charge format. In this new rule, the default option in the responsible person column becomes Eric's name. I don't see a timeline for these changes, because the system does not record the history of each rename, only the final version. It's like a house that you have lived in for 15 years. You remember which wall every window is on, which way every door faces, and where every light switch is. But one day you discover that it is not your name that is written on the property title certificate of the house. And that name has been written on it for a long time. I continue to scroll down. As your fingers slide on the touchpad, your nails tap the glass surface, making a fine click-click sound, like some kind of timer counting down. When I turned to the third quarter of last year, I stopped. There was a subdirectory in the project folder for that quarter called External Collaboration Los Angeles Office. I clicked in, and there were only a few documents inside, one of which was a personnel matching form. I opened the table. The third line of the form reads, Lena C., docking person in charge, Eric W. This is my first time seeing this document. It shows that the contact person in the Los Angeles office is Lu Yao, and the contact person in the headquarters is Eric. As a senior consultant of the planning department, I did not receive any synchronized emails or meeting invitations from this project for 3 months. But what was I doing? I was working on the revision of the annual brand manual and worked overtime until 11 every day. Eric said it was a key task of the year, and I believed him. He said, don't worry about other projects for the time being and focus on this. I believed him. It turns out that concentrating on this means taking other projects out of my sight so that another person can step in. My hand lifted from the trackpad. There is a thin layer of sweat on the fingertips, which reflects the water under the fluorescent lamp. The phone vibrated. I picked it up and read it. It was a new message from a number I hadn't saved. Claire, can we talk? No signature, but the area code for that number was Los Angeles. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then he put down the phone, and there was no reply. There were footsteps again at the door of the typesetting room. This time it was leather shoes. The heels clicked on the cement floor. The rhythm was neither fast nor slow, with a certain sense of deliberate calmness. The door was pushed open, and Eric stood at the door. There was no more coffee in his hand. He took off his suit jacket and put it on his arm, loosened his tie, and unbuttoned the first button of the collar, revealing a small piece of skin above the collarbone. There was a tiny mole in that spot, and I had touched it with my fingertips many times. Now he stood there, looking at the computer screen spread out in front of me. His eyes didn't stay on the screen for long, just a quick glance, but the muscles in his face moved, and his jawline tightened for a moment. Are you looking through old files? He asked. I'm checking the archived records. That folder is from 5 years ago. What's so interesting about it? Things from 5 years ago, I repeat it, still have the directory structure I created, but the files inside have been changed. Eric walked in and put his suit jacket on the back of the chair. His movements were slow, as if he were dealing with something that required precise force. The buttons on the shirt cuffs reflected in the light, and I saw the wrinkles on the cuffs. The lines were not ironed by the laundry, but were flattened by my own hands. He only pressed his hands on his cuffs when he was nervous. Claire, I know you are unhappy today. He sat down, turned his chair half a circle, faced me, and his knees almost touched the legs of my chair. The photo and signature matters may not be handled in detail enough, but this report will be printed tomorrow, and it doesn't make much sense for us to be entangled with these historical records now. When he said it doesn't make much sense, his eyes turned half an inch towards my mobile phone screen. He was looking at the preview of the new message. Who sent it? He asked. I didn't hide my phone. Just put it in the upper left corner of the desktop, screen facing up, with the notification for the unread message still lit. Can we talk? Los Angeles area code. Eric's eyes paused for a moment on the words Los Angeles. Do you recognize this number? He asked. I don't know. Then why don't you reply? Because I haven't decided whether I want to talk or not. He was silent for 2 seconds. Then he stretched out his right hand, put his fingers on the edge of my mobile phone screen, pushed it gently, turned the phone at an angle, and placed the screen on the table with the screen facing down. Let's talk about the report first, he said. I watched his fingers retract from the edge of the phone and naturally fall back to his lap. The movement of that hand was so fast, almost like a reflex. He didn't want me to look at the number, and he didn't want me to reply to it. But he forgot to ask me why I received a text message when I didn't recognize the number. You're talking about the report. I said, who compiled the original material for the case study part? Eric's lips moved. That's a team matter. Who on the team did the specific work? Claire? The patience in his tone was shrinking, like a rubber band being slowly stretched, and fine cracks had begun to appear on the surface. Can you stop distinguishing so clearly at this time? The report will be printed soon, and everyone in the company is waiting. If you look through these old files in the typesetting room, it will waste everyone's time. Delaying who? He paused. Delay you? I asked, or delay you and Lu Yao?